The Connection Show. Inspiring hope, health, healing. Sponsored by Brave Heart Workshops. Live with Jill Reynolds. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Like our page. Share it. Subscribe to it now and click the bell so you don't miss any of our upcoming shows.
The Connection Show, inspiring hope, health, and healing, sponsored by Brave Heart Workshops, live with Jill Reynolds. And joining me today from the East Coast is Mary Grace. Welcome to the show, Mary Grace.
Hey, Jill. Thank you. It's so great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, we just really love connecting with our guests on our show, Mary Grace. And we just believe that connecting the dots of stories helps people to have transformation in their lives. And so if you wouldn't mind taking us on a journey so that the audience knows a little bit about who you are, and share with us any parts of your life you'd like to share today so that the dots can be connected and hopefully transformation can occur in our listeners' lives as well, Mary Grace.
Sure, Jill. I'd be glad to do that. I've been giving this some thought since our last conversation. And I really want to impress upon listeners, anybody that's listening live or that comes upon the replay here, I really want people to understand that God can use every single part of your life to help you walk into your destiny. Our names were written in a book before we were born. We were inside of God, and He has had a plan for us from the beginning. Some people think that means it's a lockstep plan that's like a puppet master scenario, and that's not actually what it is, because God designed us with free will. And so a lot of the things that happen to us along the way are because of decisions that we make. Sometimes they're out of our control, especially as children. But as we get older, part of our process is that we're learning to take those lessons and those events in our lives and to turn them into a cooperation with what God has for us. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges that people face, because personally, I spent a lot of time, a lot of my adult years, looking at my life through the lens of victimhood, through the lens of thinking that everything was somebody else's fault, and that I was therefore the way I was because of that. Mm-hmm. And when I started to really understand that I have a personal responsibility to lean into the redemption and the healing and the future that God has for me, it changed everything. Another thing that happened is that I came to the realization I was going through a divorce at the time, a separation. I didn't know that it was going to result in divorce, but I was doing some work. And what I mean by that is I was actually building a flower bed, but I was listening to a podcast. Mm-hmm. And I was listening to a podcast by Dan Mohler. He was doing a teaching, and he was giving his testimony, and it was a very long series, but the gist of it was one of the big takeaways for me was, Jesus didn't hold on to the right to be offended. And it's a big concept. If people can get this, that we don't have a right to walk around offended, that we have a responsibility to walk into wholeness. And it hit me because I realized that I could spend a lot of the rest of my life thinking, woe is me, this happened to me, this person disappointed me, this person didn't fulfill their vow, this person is walking away from a vow, meaning my ex, and it's hurting me. There's a mindset there that when you think that way, it gives you permission to stay in that hurt place. And what I was learning in that process was we have the choice of whether we give ourselves permission to stay there or to move into the destiny that God has for us, which is wholeness, healing, and as your tagline says, hope, health, healing. And so that was a big pivotal moment for me and in my life. And I want to put that as a pin in the story as one of the anchor points. And then I want to go back a little bit further, actually a lot further, to my own childhood, because I was born in the 60s and grew up in what I would consider kind of an idyllic time, socially and geopolitically. I mean, it was, people say the 60s were crazy. Of course, there was a lot going on, but as a child, growing up in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, I wouldn't ask for anything. I mean, it was free range childhood, summertime, barefoot in your swimsuit, roaming the neighborhood, going to the pool. No such thing as a helicopter parent. You're outside, you get thirsty. All you hear from inside is drink from the hose, right? You're not, no juice boxes. Nobody was giving you one of those Capri Suns. Like everything was just so simple, And
when it got dark, you knew it was time to come in.
Street light, first one to see the street light. Exactly.
Yeah. And when my dad would whistle supper time, and if you weren't home for supper, you didn't eat.
Exactly. Yeah, there was, whatever was on the table. I mean, there were some meals. My mom, my mom cycled through the meals, right? The menu. And there were some nights it was not my jam. And you know what? Didn't eat. And I love that you say that, because I've been around so many of the parents today that they ask their kids, what would you like? Do you want chicken nuggets? Oh no, I don't want anything but ice cream and cookies. Okay. And I'm like, when did you become the parent? And growing up with me, Mary Grace, it was like, here's what you're eating, and if you don't want it, then I guess you wait till breakfast. Yeah, exactly. It's my cousin. She told her boys, "You get what you get. That's what's on the table," and so that was a great. I have great memories of growing up. I was very active. I was not a child that was sitting home. Of course, we didn't have computer games. We had TV with 3 stations, and there were a couple of shows I liked, but I was what you would call a tomboy. And, I was riding my bike, playing basketball, going to watch my friends play Little League. Girls weren't allowed in the sports as much then. So a lot of times I was a spectator, but swimming, you name it, I was doing it. We used to build ramps for our bicycles and jump over trash cans. That was me. So it was a great childhood, but in the midst of that, we also had a lot of darkness that was not talked about because you didn't really talk about it at that time. And that is that my mom and my dad spent most of my childhood separated. And then they finally got divorced when I was 7, and we moved in with my grandparents when I was probably 4 years old. So I was raised by a single mother and grandparents. My grandmother worked, my mother worked, my grandfather was disabled. He started really descending into alcoholism when I was about 9 or 10. And that was something that I became very familiar with. And we were that house that had very limited social contact because of that secret that was in our house. And I grew up around a lot of my cousins and in the same neighborhood within walking distance. But they were not first cousins. They were the children of, so my grandfather was a twin. So he had a brother, and his brother had 5 kids. And so there were a lot of children born from that family that were my cousins. And we were all about the same age. So we did a lot together, but it was my sister and I, because of our family situation, we sort of were kind of on the outside edge of that little circle. And that's kids are kids. Nobody was intentionally doing that. I mean, I love my cousins, but it was a little bit hard because we didn't know. I didn't know that we had that we had an alcoholic home.
Mm-hmm.
I just knew that I didn't want anybody coming to my house after 5 p.m.
Mm-hmm.
That's all. And also that I spent a lot of time outside the house, even in the wintertime. I'd go ride my bike. Just I learned coping mechanisms like we all do. But in the process, because of the way that the adults in the family handled all of that, I didn't learn a lot of really good coping skills. I self adapted. And that's one of the reasons I was so mobile and so active. You know, I would go out and spend all day out. As a kid, which is remarkable at this stage to think about that. But, you know, I read a lot. If it was raining, I read the encyclopedia, which is probably why I am good at what I do today. So, you know, I figured out how to make it work. But when it came to relationships and connection, that was something that I didn't even have a clue about how to do that, how to problem solve, how to deal with confrontation or conflict. Because in my world, conflict meant divorce. Conflict meant broken family. Conflict meant drinking your troubles away. And I knew that I didn't want any of those things. I just didn't know the alternative. And I was already a Christian. I became a Christian when I was 12 years old. And I was active in the church mainly because of music. I'm a singer, songwriter. And so some of my best memories come from being in the choir, going to music camp, spending a whole week at music camp, just singing. And that was beautiful that I had those opportunities. And my mom, to her credit, as a single mom working in retail, she somehow figured out how to get us to camp every summer. Every opportunity that came up, it was amazing. It was like her superpower, you know. She was going to get her girls to camp no matter what. And sometimes we went to more than one camp. And so, you know, thanks, Mom, for that. It's like she saw what she could control to the best of her ability, and she made that happen. And she was a good mom. You know, she passed in 2020. She loved us. We trusted her. She was a woman in the 60s and 70s who was really stuck, and there were very few alternatives at that time for her. And so she made the most of it. Was it her first choice to raise her kids in an environment with an alcoholic? No. But in her world, in her mind, it was better than the alternative, which was trying to make it work with my father at the time, who just didn't even have a remote chance of being the father that she wanted him to be, or the husband.
Now, did you ever see your dad again?
I did. Yeah, we saw him very, very intermittently. There was no parental custody schedule or anything like that. So typically he lived further away. So when he would come in town, we would see him, but it would not be scheduled, right? He would show up and call my mom and say, "I'm in town. Can I see the girls?" And you know, to my mom's credit, she never ever badmouthed him in front of us. It was hard. You know, she didn't get alimony. She didn't get child support. And she was making it without my grandparents. We probably would have been like in a shelter or, you know, on government assistance. None of that ever took place because of the support that we had in our family. But, you know, to her credit, she did the very best she could. My grandmother as well was what I would consider, she was like an angel on earth. And she was my biggest advocate. And she, because of her, they both saw, you know, the challenges and the struggles that I was having growing up. My sister also had that, you know, she had her own way of dealing with things, but I acted out, you know, quite a bit in some ways. And so they did everything they could to help me, including, you know, supporting me, going to church, going to choir, going to camp. Also, my grandmother arranged for me to get into private school for middle school. And that was something that I would say saved my life. it makes me emotional to think about it because she sacrificed a lot, and that's what you do for your
Yeah.
for your for
Yeah.
your grandchildren.
I don't know if you know, I was a single, never married mom for 17 years. So
Yeah,
you do make sacrifices, and it's hard, it's really hard. My son went to Christian school till he got into 7th grade, and so you just do
yeah,
whatever you have to do and truck
right.
through it. Yeah, yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, and so
And I love your sign behind you. Plant the seeds and grow the blessings, because that's what your mom and your grandma were doing. They were planting seeds and growing the blessings in their life.
yeah, yeah. And this is part of my story is that you take those good things that happened and you weave those into the tapestry of your life that God is building with you, with your cooperation. However, you also take those things that are sort of better off on the back of the tapestry, the threads that are frayed and that cross the wrong way. Those things, they're actually part of the tapestry.
Mm-hmm.
And when we look at all of the situations in our lives, and we're able to cooperate with God in building that destiny, then we're able to see the usefulness of those very hard things. I'm a very patient person because I spent a lot of time in my childhood around older people, and I developed a very great respect for the elderly and for people with challenges and disabilities because of that. And I'm thankful for that. Now, it happens that one of them was an alcoholic. That was my grandfather. And so, there's the good and the bad. There's the good, the bad, the ugly. And however, there's a lot that I learned from him. There's a lot that I learned from my father, who was admittedly on his own part a deadbeat dad. And so, when we try to shut those things out and pretend that they don't exist, that's when I think it's really harder to grow.
Mm-hmm.
Because we're actually missing a part of the tapestry.
Well, and I believe that's why I love connecting the dots of story, Mary Grace, because the Bible says that there'll be 4 generations of sin passed down from forefathers. So when you can pause long enough and do an honest inventory of your life and see the generational sin of, like you said, a deadbeat father, abandonment, divorce, alcoholism, when you can take the burdens backwards and then release them. I've done a lot of burden release work where you take a burden such as, say, busyness or whatever one you want, and you take it back from yourself, and then you take it back to your mother and your father, and then bring it back to your grandmother and grandfather, and then bring it back to your great-grandmother and your great-grandfather, and you take those burdens and just ask God to show you this pattern of releasing them back. Then what I love to do, this is just me, I love to take my cell phone and Google the opposite of that word. And so we just, like, the opposite of hope is despair. And so what's a manifestation of despair is depression. And so when we're living in a world today that has kind of taken on hopelessness, then you can see the burden of despair that's come in, which then manifests into depression. So when you can take those burdens back, then what I love to do is take my cell phone, Mary Grace, and Google, what's the opposite of despair? I mean, what is, like, so the opposite then, comes back if it's hope or whatever. So you take it back. So if you find a word like despair, you take it back to generations. And then once you've gone all the way back, Mary Grace, you ask the Lord to fill you up with that space, with your great-grandparents, your grandparents, with hope. So you bring that hope back into the family so that generational, stuff is left behind and there's space for blessings.
Right, right. Yeah, that's beautiful. It's interesting too how God gives us all different strategies, right? There, like I said, there's so many. There are pieces that come into your life that are meant to instruct you, it's always our choice, though, whether we pick those up. And I wanted to pick up on something that you said about abandonment, because this, I think it's obviously it's a big issue with people who go through divorce, whether it's as a child or in their own marriage. And so it's a big issue. And one of the things that I think can happen is that when you're under that spirit of abandonment, when that is something that has a very strong pull on your life, it partners with rejection, and it causes people to do sometimes desperate things and to compromise. And for example, when I was going through separation, I remember thinking that if we separated and divorced, that I would not recover, because I thought that I needed him. I thought I needed something that actually wasn't actually a need. It was a want. It was something that was coming out of that rejection. It was something that was coming out of the abandonment that had glommed onto my soul. And so when I was able to see through that, to see, okay, actually, that's not who I need. I don't need the assurance that that person will never leave me. And I'm not talking about, how the way that people treat marriage, where it's just a simple dissolution of a marriage and covenant doesn't matter. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about my soul. My soul doesn't need the reassurance that that person is never going to abandon me. What my soul needs is to rest in God and to be filled by the love of Christ. And when that shift happens, when you're somebody who's gone through abandonment, who's dealt with rejection, when you can identify that thing that's trying to come at you in any situation, it's not just relationships, it's in business, it's work, it's even just in your everyday life. It's a familiar spirit that wants to jump on you and get you into a spiral of desperation. And I say desperation because we tend to lose sight of what we actually need in times when these familiar spirits jump on us. And then we start to sort of become grabby, and we start grabbing those things that really aren't good for us, whether it's substances, whether it's relationships, whether it's binge activities, whatever it is. It's because we have lost hold of the person or the thing that we thought was our lifeline. We become like a drowning person that's just grabbing.
In my definition too, Mary Grace, back in the 90s, they used to have treatment centers for codependency. And I was blessed to be able to go. And so I say blessed because it was just amazing what I learned. And my definition of codependency is exactly what you just described. When we allow people, places, or things to become more important than ourselves, we lose our identity. And it's really easy with the book Codependent No More and all the other books on codependency to be able to identify codependency with people. But most people don't pause to say, but are you codependent with places like your job, church, where some people become so addicted to church, they go there 7 days a week and there's no balance. They like practically live there. And then things would be drugs, alcohol, sex, gambling, food, shopping, overspending, things of that. So when we allow people, places, or things to become more important than ourselves, we lose our identity, and then there's no space for God. So when we can pause and put God first, ourselves second, and most of us don't know how to put ourselves second. We put ourselves third, fourth, fifth, sixth. So I always believe it's God first, self second, family, if we have a spouse or kids, third, and then our job, fourth. And so when you can stay in balance, it makes a big difference. And I love making a spreadsheet with one side being binging and one side being restricting. And you list everything in life you binge on and everything in life you restrict. so that when your life starts to feel unbalanced, you look at your spreadsheet and go, okay, I'm binging right now on busyness. And so what am I restricting? Oh, relationships or connection. And so you'll go, if I spend some time with friends or family, I can get in balance and not be out of balance.
Oh, yeah, interesting. Yeah. One thing too I wanted to say about that codependence is that there's a sneaky little thing that happens in codependence and in people that deal with rejection and abandonment, and that is people can become manipulators. Mm-hmm. And what I mean by that, it's maybe not as overt as you might think when you hear the word manipulation. A lot of times, for somebody that has fears and issues around abandonment, we can develop a skill of becoming necessary, where we're becoming indispensable to somebody else. And that is we can do that either by serving, by gifting people, by lavishing them with gifts, by being selfless with your time, always showing up. And when you said, people being at church 7 days a week, this made me think of it. It to the outside world, it looks like kindness and selflessness and generosity. However, there is an internal voice going on that is saying, at some point, everyone is going to recognize my virtue and my kindness, and they're going to reciprocate. But it's an unspoken expectation, and it's rooted actually in that insecurity, in that desire to belong, in that desire not to be rejected. And what happens is, because that person sometimes has undeveloped social skills, undeveloped communication skills, that need is never communicated. That desire is never communicated. They don't even always know that that's their motive, their motivation behind what they're doing. And what typically ends up happening is that the person has expectations of reciprocation, of appreciation, of love, of connection. It doesn't happen the way that they envision it. And so instead of course adjusting, they actually start to become resentful and bitter, because their expectation isn't being met. And I've seen it happen in my own self. And this is something that the Lord really checked me on. And it going back to what I was saying at the beginning, is that when we have an expectation, or when we think that we have a right to be offended, then we're going to be offended. And we're going to be disappointed. But a lot of times the disappointments that we set ourselves up for are our own private little monologue that we've had back and forth, even though we think that we've had a conversation and an agreement with the people that we are loving and sharing with and being generous to. It's really a one-sided agreement. And I don't know if I explained that very well, but I think it's really critical for people to understand that. It happens very subtly. It happens in marriage. It happens in relationships. It happens at work. It happens at church. It happens pretty much everywhere. And it's actually rooted in, believe it or not, a Jezebel spirit, because it's actually it's actually something that is designed to take you out rather than to build you up. Mm-hmm. Because it's manipulation. Mm-hmm. It really is. That kindness that everybody sees is actually a form of manipulation that you're doing, even if you don't know you're being manipulative. You're manipulating people into loving you back. Mm-hmm. That's not how love works.
Yeah. Well, I've come to a place too, Mary Grace. Again, the Holy Spirit has really shown me the impactfulness of connecting dots of story. And so when you speak of the word abandonment, like you did, the Lord has showed me sometimes to close my eyes and go back inside and see, where did that part come from? Where did abandonment originate? And if you think about it, Mary Grace, abandonment originated at the moment we were born, because the second you come through the womb, or if you're a C-section, what do you feel? You feel abandoned by your mother because they cut the umbilical cord, and you've been in this really beautiful, safe womb for 9 months, and now you're on the outside having to survive. And so I look at it. I love the word all. All parts are good. So I don't look at words anymore like, oh, this is a negative. Abandonment's negative. No. So I felt that way. Maybe we feel that way at birth, but does that mean we were abandoned? So you can look at it, and I take the word and embrace it, and then I find my safe place, which for me is the beach. And I just ask abandonment, would you be so willing to unblend for me and go to the beach and chill? I'll give you a nice lawn chair, and I'll set you out some suntan lotion and some sand pails, and you can go play in the sand. And so it's called unblending those parts so that they don't rule your life. And then you can fill that space, like I fill that space with God, that God's a God who's never abandoned us, and he never will. And so I'm filled up with his space of love instead of that part manifesting and taking control of my life. So moving forward in your life through this journey, Mary Grace, can you share with the audience what God's brought you to today and the amazing things he's manifested in you that you're doing in your life currently now? Because I know you said you are a singer and a songwriter and other things you're doing today.
Yeah, it's interesting because, growing up, it was fun. We had a great time. But one of the things that we heard a lot from adults was children should be seen and not heard. And we've all heard that before. And because of that, I actually became a very keen observer in the world around me. And it's very interesting to see what I'm doing today. Because I have my own podcast. I speak regularly. I do public speaking, and I'm involved in what I would call apostleship and coaching and equipping and training literally millions of people around the world at this point. And so that is just kind of the irony of it's a very apt picture of what happened in the story of Joseph, when everything was against him, and he actually became the second in command in all of Egypt, right? And he said, what the enemy meant for evil, the Lord turned around for good. And it's just kind of funny because you have these little points in life that point to that you don't even realize. And I was cleaning out the basement in my parents' house about a year and a half ago, and I found a little blue ribbon that I had won in the 5th grade, and it was for public speaking. And so I was 10 years old and won a ribbon for that. And so here we are all these years later, and what am I doing? I'm speaking. Mm-hmm. And I'm conducting interviews on my channel, Mary Grace Media, for those who want to check it out. I do a show called GraceTime TV, and it's fantastic because I feel as though part of my mandate and my call is to help people walk into their destiny. And I do that through equipping, through sharing of information, through helping people to problem solve, giving them tools and tactics for navigating the geopolitical landscape, the cultural landscape, Christianity. And it's a privilege. I can't even believe sometimes that I'm able to do that because if you look back even 5-6 years ago at where I was, you wouldn't have been able to predict this because of the place that I was in emotionally. And so I really give the glory and the credit to the Lord for helping me for opening my eyes and for helping me to take personal responsibility and to really do the work of moving ahead, of healing, mm-hmm. of not just healing, not staying in a wounded place and saying I was broken, but actually just moving in power and authority as a Christian and taking up that mantle of really walking out the calling and the mandate that God has on my life. I think those are two different things. So I love that I'm surrounded by so many supportive people, so many kind and gracious friends who, will speak encouragement to me, but also will speak correction. And we all need that.
Yeah. Well, what I'd love to do now is just to show your bio. So this this is how you can reach out to Mary Grace. It's got her website, marygracemedia.com. And then, from there, what we'll do is we'll put on the page your site too, so people can reach out to you. Now, do you do consultation with people as well, Mary Grace, or are you just doing podcasting specifically?
Mostly podcasting. I'm working on a few projects that will open the door to that, to consulting and strategy. I even business consulting, marketing, that type of thing. I have a really big quiver of skills. And so that's one of the reasons.
And you sing. So if people need a good singer too.
Yes, also, exactly. And I do sing, speaking of healing, there is an anointing for healing on my voice. And you can find some of my songs mostly right now on my Facebook and my Instagram. Sometimes I just go live and I'll sing. I don't have a body of work up on a music platform yet, like Spotify or anything like that. But that's something that's coming. I'm definitely evolving here, and it's wonderful. But I do, I've written a few songs, and just reach out to me, info@marygracemedia.com. Anybody that wants to inquire about bookings, about, having me come to your venue or appear on your show, anything like that, I'd be happy to do that. Definitely stay tuned for the projects that I have coming out within the next 2 months, though. It's going to be very exciting.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for joining us today. I know you have a hard break here, and so we want to honor your time. And so everyone, thanks so much too for joining us at the Connection Show, inspiring hope, health, and healing in the world. Thanks again, Mary Grace, for joining in.
Thank you, Jill.
Have a blessed day, everyone. Bye now.
Join us for the hope, health, healing, Aruba Woman's Getaway. October 26th to November 1st, 2022. Are you overworked? Feeling stressed out or exhausted? Is it time to spoil yourself? Relax and breathe in life at a beautiful private villa in Aruba for 6 nights and 7 days. Renew your mind and body. Discover greater self-awareness. Joining in connection, wellness, stillness, enhancing your inner peace, and reboot you. Experience amazing beaches. Enjoy snorkeling. Area attractions. Shopping till you drop. Beachfront dining. Imagine releasing anxiety. Reconnecting with self. Restoring your soul. Bring your friends and savor delicious home-cooked meals. Create lasting memories. Join us now. Register today. Book your flights to Aruba for a getaway October 26th to November 1st, 2022. Register by going to braveheartworkshops.com. That's braveheartworkshops.com. We'll see you in Aruba.
Hydrogen is used by health professionals as a powerful antioxidant and the #1 tool to fight inflammation. Studies show therapeutic potential in cancer, diabetes, digestive, and heart issues, and essentially every organ and system in the body. This is not medical advice, because I'm not your doctor, but if you have any health concerns, I strongly recommend that you learn more about hydrogen. Get educated at holyhydrogen.com and order the best hydrogen generator known to man. Use code BRAVEHEART for $100 off your order. Because hydrogen is the smallest molecule in existence, it can pass through the cell membrane and even the blood-brain barrier to clear out inflammation and free radical damage where other antioxidants just can't get to. Visit holyhydrogen.com to see the latest technology that elevates your immune system and fights inflammation. Search their research library to see if hydrogen has a track record for helping a health concern you're dealing with. Make sure to use code BRAVEHEART for $100 off your order. Remember, holyhydrogen.com.
Thanks for joining us today on The Connection Show, where we bring you stories that will transform your life. The Connection Show would appreciate your support. Please go to either our Patreon page or our PayPal Me Now link today. We love our podcast show guests and appreciate our listeners and YouTube subscribers. Please go to our YouTube channel called The Connection Show and Braveheart Workshops and subscribe now. Remember to click the gray bell in the All tab so you don't miss any upcoming episodes.